She was the Lavender Girl, the box office queen groomed to replace Marilyn Monroe. But one night in 1966, Kim Novak, the world's most desired woman, packed a Corvette and drove straight into the darkness, leaving Hollywood without a goodbye. Why did she trade the throne for a life with beasts in the snow? Today, we peel away the mask of Kim Novak to find Marilyn Pauline Novak, who spent a lifetime fighting just to be herself. February 13, 1933, Chicago, a city of steel, wind, and the crushing weight of the Great Depression. In the middle of this gray, concrete landscape, Marilyn Pauline Novak was born. Her father worked the railroads. Her mother held the house together. They called her Mickey, and Mickey was never meant to be a goddess. She was a ghost in her own life, a terrified little girl who felt the edges of the world were too sharp for her skin. She didn't walk through the hallways of her elementary school. She hugged the walls, trying to disappear. One teacher, a woman who should have known better, looked Mickey in the eye and told her she would never amount to anything. That kind of cruelty doesn't just bruise, it breaks bone. It convinced a young girl that she was worthless, that her existence was an error. So she ran, not away from home, but away from people. She found her tribe among the voiceless. Dogs, horses, birds, they became her confidants. Animals didn't care about her clothes or her grades. They didn't demand she speak or smile. They just let her be. This connection wasn't a hobby. It was a survival mechanism for a soul that felt alien in human company. Luck, or perhaps a curse, found her anyway. She was spotted not because of a burning talent she displayed, but because of the way the light hit her face. She was 21, modeling refrigerators at a trade show, when the machinery of Hollywood scooped her up. She didn't walk through the gates of Columbia Pictures as an artist. She entered as raw material. Waiting for her was Harry Cohn. If the golden age of Hollywood had a devil, it was Harry Cohn. He was the head of Columbia, a man who ran his studio like a prison camp and treated his stars like cattle. He didn't see Marilyn Pauline Novak. He saw a vacancy. Rita Hayworth was fading, rebellious. He needed fresh meat to feed the box office. He looked at this shy, trembling girl from Chicago and didn't see a human being. He saw a lump of clay. "You're too fat," he told her. "You're a Polak. You've got too much hip." The insults weren't suggestions. They were orders. The studio system in the 1950s was absolute. They owned your face, your weight, your sleep, and your name. Cohn wanted to strip her identity down to the studs. He ordered her to starve herself until her ribs showed. He looked at her dark blonde hair and sneered. He didn't want reality. He wanted fantasy. So they bleached her hair until it turned a strange, shimmering lavender blonde. It wasn't a color found in nature, and that was the point. She was being engineered into something ethereal, something that couldn't possibly exist on the streets of Chicago. Then came the final erasure. Marilyn was the name of the girl at Fox. Monroe. Cohn wouldn't have it. He threw names at her like scraps of food. "Kit Marlowe," he barked. He liked the sound of it. But Mickey, the girl who hid from teachers, found a spark of steel in her spine. She refused. She fought for her father's name. "I am a Novak," she said. It was a terrifying stand to make against a man who could end her career with a phone call. They compromised. Kim. Short, punchy, meaningless. But it sounded modern. Kim Novak. The girl named Mickey was buried under layers of makeup, hair dye, and starvation diets. In her place stood a shimmering invention, a woman designed to be looked at but never heard. The world saw a new queen rising. Kim saw a cage door closing. She had won the lottery. Millions of girls would have killed to be in her shoes, yet she felt the cold, hard grip of ownership around her neck. She was property now. And property doesn't get to have feelings. The year was 1955. The summer heat of Kansas radiated off the screen, thick and heavy. In the darkened theaters of America, millions of eyes fixed upon a single figure. Kim Novak walked onto the lantern-lit dance floor in Picnic. The band struck up Moonglow. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose, her face flushed with a mixture of innocence and raw, terrifying desire. She began to sway. She clapped her hands to the beat, looking up at William Holden with those heavy, hooded eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. That scene altered the landscape of Hollywood. It captured a carnal magic. Critics, who once dismissed her as a studio prop, suddenly sat up straight. Kim Novak commanded the screen with a lethargic, hypnotic energy. She possessed a quality that Marilyn Monroe lacked. Where Monroe was fire and giggles, Novak was ice and silence. She drew the audience in because she held everything back. Picnic smashed box office records. It crowned her the new queen of Columbia Pictures. She stood alone at the summit, the #1 box office attraction in the world, bathed in the golden light of adoration. She cemented this status immediately with The Man with the Golden Arm. Starring opposite Frank Sinatra was a test of survival. Sinatra was a shark, known for devouring co-stars who showed weakness. Kim met his intensity with a quiet, bruised dignity. She played Molly, the club hostess who loves a junkie, with a heartbreaking tenderness. She proved she could strip away the glamour and reveal the bone. She was an actress. She was a star. She was untouchable, or so it seemed. By late 1957, the air in the ivory tower had grown thin. The fame was a cold companion. In the isolation of her celebrity, Kim sought warmth. She found it in the most dangerous place possible in Eisenhower's America. She met Sammy Davis Jr. They found each other in the smoky haze of the nightclub circuit. Sammy was kinetic energy, a genius of song and dance, breaking barriers every time he stepped on stage. He was also a black man in a country divided by color lines. Kim was the white goddess of the silver screen. Their connection was instant. They recognized the loneliness in each other. They were two anomalies, two souls exploited by the same machinery. They risked everything for moments of stolen intimacy. They drove along the dark coastline, held hands in private homes, and shared a love that defied the laws of their era. Harry Cohn watched from his office at Columbia. The emperor of the studio system saw his empire threatened. Rumors of the affair reached the press. Gossip columnists sharpened their knives. Cohn feared a boycott in the southern states. He feared the devaluation of his greatest asset. He decided to end it. He bypassed the police. He bypassed the lawyers. Harry Cohn picked up the phone and called the mob. The message, sent to Sammy Davis Jr., came from the underworld figures of Chicago and Las Vegas. It was brutal in its simplicity. They ordered him to marry a black woman within 48 hours. The alternative was physical mutilation. They promised to gouge out his remaining eye and break his legs. They promised to end his ability to perform forever. For Kim, the threat was designed to target her vanity and her livelihood. The mobsters told her they would throw acid in her face. They painted a graphic picture of her future. Her beauty melted away, leaving her a scarred monster, unfilmable and unloved. Imagine the terror paralyzing a young woman of 24. The most powerful men in her industry, men with direct lines to organized crime, held her life in their hands. The love affair ended that night. It died, not from a lack of passion, but from the cold grip of survival. Sammy Davis Jr. married Lorraine White, a dancer he barely knew, in a sham ceremony days later. He drank himself into a stupor at the wedding. Kim retreated into a shell of silence. The message was clear. Her body, her face, and her heart belonged to the studio. Then history delivered a twist of supreme irony. In February 1958, mere weeks after destroying Kim's happiness, Harry Cohn suffered a heart attack and died. The tyrant fell. The man who ordered the threats was gone. Kim attended the funeral, a stoic figure in black. But the death of the warden did not open the prison gates. The fear remained. The trauma of the threats, the loss of Sammy, the realization of her own powerlessness, it all festered beneath the surface. And in this precise moment of internal devastation, she began filming Vertigo. Alfred Hitchcock, a director with a predator's instinct for weakness, utilized her pain. He cast her as Judy Barton, a woman forced to remake herself into the image of a dead woman, Madeline, to please a man. The role mirrored her life. The studio had dyed her hair, changed her name, and dictated her clothes. Hitchcock forced her into the gray suit. He forced her to pin her hair into the tight spiral bun. He constricted her movement. When you watch Vertigo today, you see a performance of haunting depth. Kim Novak drifts through the film like a ghost. Her eyes are wide with a deer-in-the-headlights panic. That was real. She channeled the heartbreak of the Sammy Davis affair and the shadow of the mob threats into Judy Barton. She played a woman erasing herself for love. The film released in May 1958. It stands today as a masterpiece of cinema, and Kim Novak stands at its center, beautiful and tragic. She was the biggest star on Earth, yet she had never felt more invisible. The 1960s arrived. The studio system began to crumble, but the executives still clung to the old ways. They refused to see Kim as anything other than a sex object. They ignored her intelligence. They ignored her pleas for substantive roles. They cast her in Kiss Me Stupid in 1964, forcing her to play Polly the Pistol, a caricature of a bimbo waitress. The role humiliated her. She spent her nights writing poetry and painting in her trailer, desperate to preserve her mind while the industry sold her body. In 1965, she reached for a lifeline. She was in England filming the amorous adventures of Moll Flanders when she fell for her co-star, Richard Johnson. Richard was different. He was a British stage actor, a man of culture and gentle manners. He respected her intellect. He saw Mickey Novak, the girl from Chicago, not just the movie star. They married in a quiet ceremony. Kim believed this was the answer. She threw herself into domesticity, hoping a husband and a home would shield her from the glare of the spotlight. But Hollywood allows no sanctuaries. The machine turned its gears against them. The paparazzi besieged their home, climbing the walls, destroying their privacy. The studio demanded she return to work immediately. They wanted more glamour, more sex appeal. The pressure cooker of fame boiled over. The marriage buckled under the weight of her celebrity. Richard Johnson tried to protect her, but the force of the industry was too great. They divorced after only 13 months. It was a failure that broke her spirit. She stood in her mansion in Bel Air, 33 years old, surrounded by wealth and accolades. She had survived Harry Cohn. She had survived the mob. She had survived the heartbreak of Sammy Davis Jr. She had reached the pinnacle of her profession with Vertigo. And she realized, with crystal clarity, that none of it mattered. She was alone. The golden cage was still a cage, and the air inside was running out. By the late summer of 1966, Kim Novak was a ghost walking through her own life. The divorce papers were signed. The studio wars had left her exhausted. She sat in her Bel Air mansion, a 33-year-old icon who had everything the world promised, yet felt completely bankrupt inside. The scripts piling up on her desk were no longer just bad, they were suffocating. The industry demanded she continue to be the mindless sex symbol, the lavender girl, even as the world outside was changing, evolving, revolting. She felt stagnant. She felt trapped in a loop of artificial smiles and empty dialogue. Then, the sky turned black over Los Angeles. It wasn't a metaphor. A storm of biblical proportions hit Southern California. The ground, already unstable from fire season, gave way. A massive mudslide roared down the canyon, aiming straight for her sanctuary. The wall of mud slammed into her estate with the force of a freight train. It tore through the manicured gardens. It smashed through the walls of the house she had spent a fortune building. It buried her living room, her art collection, her closets filled with furs and designer gowns, under tons of wet, brown sludge. Kim stood in the rain, watching the destruction. She watched the mud swallow the physical proof of her stardom. Most people would have fallen to their knees and wept. Most people would have frantically tried to dig out their jewelry. Kim Novak stood there and took a deep breath. For the first time in 12 years, she felt clean. The disaster clarified everything. As she looked at the ruin, she realized she felt absolutely no attachment to any of it. The house was just wood and stone. The awards were just metal. The clothes were costumes for a character she no longer wanted to play. The mudslide didn't take her life away. It gave it back to her. It was a violent, undeniable permission slip from the universe to let go. She didn't hesitate. She didn't call her agent to strategize a comeback. She didn't call the insurance company to rebuild the cage. She walked to the garage. Miraculously, her Chevrolet Corvette Stingray was untouched. She packed what little she needed. She threw a few bags into the passenger seat. She brought her paints. She brought her unfinished canvases. She grabbed the keys. This wasn't a calculated career break. This was a prison break. She turned the ignition. The engine of the Corvette roared to life, a deep, guttural sound of American horsepower. She shifted into gear and drove out of the broken gates of her estate. She pointed the car north. She drove with a singular purpose. She passed the iconic Hollywood sign, leaving it in the smog. She passed the studio lots of Columbia Pictures, leaving the ghosts of Harry Cohn and the Lavender Girl behind. She hit the Pacific Coast Highway and pressed the gas pedal down. The landscape began to change. The artificial palm trees and neon lights of Los Angeles faded. The air grew colder, sharper. The cliffs of Big Sur rose up to meet her. She drove for days, watching the world transform from the brown dust of Southern California to the deep, lush greens of the north. She crossed the state line into Oregon. Here, the silence was heavy and real. The wind smelled of pine needles and snow, not expensive perfume and desperation. The press went berserk. When the news broke that the world's biggest female star had simply vanished, the headlines were vicious. They couldn't process it. They called her crazy. They called her unstable. They branded her a quitter. They sneered, asking who in their right mind would walk away from millions of dollars and eternal fame. To the media, leaving the party early was the ultimate sin, but they were looking at it through the lens of greed. Kim was looking at it through the lens of survival. She knew something they didn't. She knew that if she stayed one more year, one more movie, one more day, Mickey Novak would cease to exist. She didn't quit. She escaped. She drove that Corvette out of the spotlight and into the shadows, finally finding the one thing Hollywood could never give her: freedom. Oregon received her with a cold, cleansing embrace. The towering pines and the rushing waters of the Rogue River offered a cathedral of silence that Los Angeles could never understand. Here, the wind didn't whisper rumors. It simply blew through the trees, ancient and indifferent to human vanity. Kim Novak settled into this wilderness, shedding the skin of the Lavender Girl to rediscover the rhythms of the earth. She bought a ranch, surrounded herself with the animals she trusted more than people, and began the long, slow work of healing her spirit. For 10 years, she lived quietly, guarding her solitude like a precious stone. Then, in 1976, the universe decided she was ready for a different kind of connection. It started with a sick horse. She called a local veterinarian to her ranch, a man named Robert Malloy. He arrived in a truck covered in dust, carrying his medical bag and a calm, steady demeanor. He walked into the barn and focused entirely on the suffering animal. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't stammer or stare at the woman who had once captivated the world in Vertigo. He saw a woman worried about her horse, and he treated her with the same professional kindness he would offer any rancher in the valley. That simple, unadorned interaction sparked something profound. Robert Malloy was the antithesis of the men she had known in Hollywood. He was grounded, practical, and deeply connected to the cycles of life and death. He offered her a love that demanded nothing but her presence. They married that same year in an outdoor ceremony under the open sky. This union became the longest and most significant role of her life, lasting 44 years until his passing in 2020. Their life together was a masterpiece of simplicity. They spent their days riding horses through the snow-covered fields, tending to their llamas, and watching the seasons change from the porch of their log cabin. In the evenings, they read by the fire, two souls comfortable in the shared silence. For a woman who had been treated as a public commodity, this private, ordinary domesticity felt like the greatest luxury of all. Kim embraced her new reality with a fierce maternal instinct. Though she never bore biological children, she found a deep sense of purpose in becoming a stepmother to Robert's 2 children. She poured her nurturing energy into them, proving that motherhood is defined by love rather than blood. She extended this compassion to the natural world around her, turning her ranch into a refuge for injured animals. Every healed wing and mended leg became a testament to her capacity for care. Yet even in this paradise, storms still raged inside her mind. For decades, Kim had wrestled with extreme highs and crushing lows, emotional tidal waves that she could neither predict nor control. In Hollywood, they had labeled her difficult or temperamental. She had spent half her life believing she was broken, tormented by a chaos she couldn't name. The truth finally arrived in the early 2000s. Doctors diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. The diagnosis came as a revelation, a lifting of a heavy fog. It gave a name to the invisible beast she had been fighting since childhood. She finally understood that the intense feelings of her youth, the panic during the studio years, and the desperate need for escape were not character flaws. They were chemical. They were part of her biology. With this understanding came forgiveness. She stopped blaming Mickey Novak for feeling too much. Instead, she channeled those intense emotions into her art. She returned to her first love, painting. Her studio became her sanctuary within a sanctuary. She stood before the easel for hours, covering large canvases with surreal, dreamlike images. She painted the eyes of the animals she loved. She painted the wind. She painted the feeling of vertigo. The art allowed her to speak in a language deeper than words, turning her pain into something beautiful and tangible. Through her brushstrokes, she reconciled the two halves of her soul, the shy girl from Chicago and the icon who walked away. Kim Novak found her happy ending, not in a box office hit, but in the quiet dignity of a life lived on her own terms. She found it in the eyes of Robert Malloy, in the breath of her horses, and in the vibrant colors of her paintings. She proved that the greatest success is not conquering the world, but conquering the fear inside yourself. In 2014, Kim Novak stepped back into the blinding light one last time. She walked onto the stage of the Academy Awards to present an award, standing tall at 81 years old. She expected respect. Instead, she received ridicule. The internet, a new and faceless mob, mocked her appearance. They laughed at her plastic surgery. Even powerful men, including a future president, joined the chorus of insults. But they forgot who they were dealing with. This was not the frightened girl who trembled before Harry Cohn. This was a woman who had tamed wild horses and survived the solitude of the mountains. She did not retreat into the shadows this time. She stood her ground. She publicly called out the bullies, declaring that she would no longer be silenced by the judgment of others. In that moment, she showed more dignity than the entire industry that had once crowned her queen. Kim Novak is the ultimate anomaly in Hollywood history. We are conditioned to worship tragic icons. We romanticize the heartbreak of Marilyn Monroe or the self-destruction of Judy Garland because their pain feeds our hunger for drama. But Kim Novak denied us a tragedy. She refused to die young for our entertainment. She committed the ultimate act of rebellion. She lived. She sits in Oregon today, surrounded by her paintings and the memories of a love that was real. She looks out at the snow and knows the truth. The movies fade. The celluloid rots. The applause eventually stops. But the peace of a life lived on your own terms, that is eternal. Kim Novak made her choice. And looking at her smile today, she won. Thank you for walking through the archives with me. If this story touched something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all. Subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars, but keep your feet on the ground.